Bryan Milligan with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program with the OSU Library. I'm in Durant today. It's June 23rd, 2016, and I'm talking with Tommy Kramer. We are doing this interview as a part of the O State Stories Oral History Collection for the Cowboy in Every County project. All right, now we won't forget what we're doing. Okay. So the easy part, just tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from? Who are your parents? Do you have family? All that good stuff.
Okay. Well, I was born in Tulsa, raised on a cattle ranch and horse ranch in East Tulsa County. My parents were associated with horses and agriculture, and yet they both worked in Tulsa. We lived on a ranch doing ranching as a kind of a secondary income, and so our whole family was excited about agriculture and being a part of agriculture. And when I graduated from high school at Tulsa East Central, I went to Miami, northeastern Oklahoma A&M, and got my associate's degree agriculture there, and enjoyed the 2-year stay in Miami. It was just a great opportunity to get basic education, college basic courses. And then I went to Panhandle State University my junior and senior year, so I got my Bachelor of Science degree at Panhandle State.
That's a pretty big shift.
It was, yeah, I went clear across the state, I promise you, from water and trees to limited water and no trees. Met a lot of great folks out in the Panhandle. They call it the No Man's Land, and they have the No Man's Land Museum there in Goodwill. But I really enjoyed, it was a great education. I really enjoyed my stay there and my education. I was able to work in some feedlots for some major corporations, worked in a sale barn at Texoma, Oklahoma, each Friday and Saturday as a secondary income. Also worked on the college farm at Panhandle State, and manufactured all on the college farm. I run the feed mill, and so I manufactured all the feed there at the dairy and beef cattle, horse, sheep, swine facilities.
So let me ask you this: what made you decide to go all the way to Panhandle from Miami?
Well, when I graduated, I worked on an Angus ranch in Miami, the Tom Bomford Angus Ranch, and so my love has been horses and beef cattle. And as I looked around, the choices to stay in Oklahoma are limited from a college education standpoint, and I went to Stillwater, visited the campus. Literally wanted to be a veterinarian, and so I went to the College of Veterinary Medicine and kind of scoped it out, interviewed, talked to some of the professors there in the College of Medicine, Veterinary Medicine, pardon me, and I just didn't feel comfortable for some reason. It was just probably a maturity thing in my life. It was a big campus, a lot of people, and with the School of Veterinary Science and Medicine there, it was, this is A, B, C, D, and you're going to do it our way, and there wasn't a lot of flexibility. And I think that flexibility in my life is very important, and I just didn't feel comfortable. I went back home and told my parents, that I just don't think this would be the right decision at this point in time. And my dad said, well, let's go out to Panhandle State and visit. And he set the interview process up with the Dean of Agriculture, and then the Dean of Agriculture set it up with the college president. And it was just a different overall attitude with small college, working together with students and education, and being able to have more hands-on experience. And so that's kind of how it occurred. The dean at that point was Dean Milton England, and He's deceased now, but when we drove out from Tulsa, we left. I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning when we drove clear across from Tulsa, clear across to the Panhandle, and he was waiting on us at his home, and we had breakfast with his wife and himself and my dad and I, and we spent the majority of the day touring the campus and meeting with some of the professors. And it was just kind of a homecoming feeling, and so I enjoyed my stay there. I graduated as the top agricultural student, judging team experience, working on the college farm and running the feed mill. I actually run the swine operation, worked in the meats lab, and then working on the side. Everybody kind of worked as a student. It was a working student relationship at Panhandle State. And so in saying that, working at the sale barn, feedlots, I worked some combine farming operations. You'd do anything you could to make a dollar, and it was just exciting time in my life to really move me to the next level of education. Mm-hmm. I didn't dream about ever going to graduate school. That was never in my thought process, and I just continually excelled. My junior and senior year was honored as the top agriculture graduate, and at that point then I started receiving some letters of graduate schools at various agricultural universities, land grant colleges, and after touring some campuses, K-State, Iowa State, New Mexico State, OSU, I just felt good going back to Stillwater and pursuing a master's degree in meat science, and it clicked at that point, and I think it was strictly a growing time in my life from an educational standpoint, and a comfort zone. Mm-hmm. I was just not ready to start my junior year at Oklahoma State and pursue veterinary medicine. And this really excited me, graduating at Panhandle State and visiting campuses of the land grant colleges. In saying that, I had a great experience at OSU there in the meat science department and the Department of Animal Science. Mm-hmm. I really had a discipline that kind of fit my thought process. Strong sciences, biology, chemistry, math, statistics, biochem, general chem, meat science, and agriculture, and that just really excited me, and I just continued to grow. And my senior year in graduate school, I was finishing my second year of graduate school. The meat science professor said, "Tommy, there's an opportunity here in the state of Oklahoma at Eastern Oklahoma State College at Wilburton. They're looking for a person that could go to Wilburton, be on the staff, the agricultural staff at Eastern, and build a meat science program, taking an old dairy barn facility that hadn't been used in many years and converting it to a USDA inspected facility, hire the staff, recruit the students." And we literally took a shell of a dairy barn and brought it under USDA inspection. I was able to spec all the equipment for the Meat Science Center, hire the staff, recruit the students, and that was a great 5 years in doing that. I think the only thing that probably I was a little naive being directed to do that, which it excited me. I love the challenge of building this USDA center and recruiting these ag students across the state. I forgot to really think about family, income, and our future. and the salary was so low that the students were graduating at the end of their second year with about 65 hours of study plus a summer internship program that all students had to take to work in the meat industry between their freshman and sophomore year. When they came back and was talking about their experiences, well, that kind of lined them up at graduation to be interviewed by the large meat companies across the country, the IBPs, the Swift, the Tysons, the Oscar Mayers, that level, plus some regional meat companies in Oklahoma and surrounding region. These students at 20 years of age was literally starting at about 3 times the salary that I was making on a 12-year contract. And after 5 years and winning the first Houston meat show hands down, I took 10 young men to the first Houston meats contest, and I guess you'd say we stole the show. We literally won every contest section, and then we had 5 out of the top 10. We had 5 individuals that placed out of the top 10 with these 10 students with 2 teams, and we brought home a whole van full of trophies and belt buckles, and my counterpart in graduate school was Dr. Dennis Stifler, and he was at Texas A&M, and he took a team. He won the senior division, I won the junior division, but we literally, our scores were higher than Texas A&M, so we set a pretty good standard right out of the box at the first Houston Stock Show Meats Contest. And kind of at that point, I started getting calls from meat companies my 4th and 5th year at Eastern, and there were some very nice job offers. And so my wife, we had two young baby girls. Mm-hmm. My wife had just graduated from the RN nursing program at Eastern, and which was a very outstanding program at Eastern. And it was a time to kind of realign the direction of our family. And so I had the opportunity to look at jobs and interview across the country with major meat companies. Jerry Owens, the owner of Owens Country Sausage in Richardson, Texas, called me just out of the clear blue and said, "Tommy, I want to come meet with you. Our plant manager that's been here for about 30 years is going to retire next year, and we've watched your meat science program and graduates, and we've seen you interact with meats organizations, the American Meat Institute, the Southwest Meat Processors, and the Oklahoma and Texas Meat Processors, and we think you'd be a good fit to manage our operation." And went and met with the Owens family. Had the opportunity to visit with Mr. Owens, Jerry Owens' mom and dad, Mr. and Miss Owens. We had a great time there. We visited, and it just opened a door in my career to step in and spend a year in training with the existing processing plant operations manager, and then take over that position when he retired.
So you moved into the private industry? I
moved in at that point to industry. And was in charge of all the processing operations at Owens Country Sausage.
Can we go back a little bit to school and then come back? I think
Sure.
this is sort of a good break to do some things. Help me understand the timeline for this. So when did you graduate high school, and when did you sort of hit all these other places?
Well, I graduated from Tulsa East Central in 1968, and then started that next fall at Northeastern A&M, and worked there on Tom Bomford's Angus Ranch, and went to school there. And it took me an extra semester to graduate because I become ill. Mm-hmm. And I ended up with a infection and had to lay out part of a semester, and so it took me 5 semesters with this. They called it back then the kissing disease.
Oh, right. Yes.
So I ended up in the hospital, several hospitals to be exact. Actually, 3 different hospitals: Miami, Joplin, and Tulsa, before they found out what was wrong with me. I just was run down working and education and.
So that's mononucleosis.
Mononucleosis, and
was it not that common at that point?
It was not very common back then, and it was hard to detect, and I was really ill. I mean, I really was burning the candle at both ends with show stock and taking show stock on the road and going to school and working at the ranch, and it was very rigorous. And with mononucleosis, it just ended up. I think I ended up being in the hospital about 7 or 8 weeks total before I was fully recovered with that.
Oh, yeah.
And then ended up at that point then looking at Oklahoma State as my next move, and going to Panhandle State. I did take off with that semester, that 5th semester. I went and started pipelining, and was a pipeline welder out in West Texas and New Mexico with a large oil company, oil and gas company, and then came back to Panhandle, went to Panhandle, not come back, but went to Panhandle, and spent the 2 years there, and then in 72, ended up in 1972 moving to Oklahoma State, graduating in 1975 with a master's degree there in animal science.
Okay. So another thing struck me too, and I'm just curious about this. So whenever you decided to go tour Panhandle State, I think you said that your dad called the dean of the agricultural school.
The dean of ag.
Did he know him beforehand?
He did not. It was just a blind phone call, and
was that pretty common to?
No. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and my parents. My mother had a 2-year associate's degree. My dad didn't have a degree. When it's kind of unique, when he got out of the service, out of the Army, 4-year stint in the Army, high school, Army, he came to Tulsa from Henrietta. He was raised in Henrietta, Oklahoma. Went to Tulsa, went in, got a newspaper, an apartment, and took an interview with an oil company, and worked 39 years and it ended up changing the name through the years, but it ended up being, when he retired, BP Amco. He was a geologist, lab technician for 39 years. They trained him, and then he managed a laboratory for them. And then my mom worked there in our family, her family's grocery store, meat market, and business. And then she retired from Ford Motor Company glass plant in Broken Arrow. But they realized that we had a good life. We didn't have a lot of extras. We farmed and ranched as a second income, but they knew in their mind that the 4 kids, my twin brothers and my sister and I, we needed a formal education past high school. And being the oldest, they directed me to my college career at the three colleges and universities. And so, when I came back from Stillwater and spending that day there on campus, that evening, Dad asked me, when he got in from the oil company, he said, from work, he said, "Tell me, how did your experience go at Stillwater?" And I said, "I'm not comfortable with it, Dad. I just don't feel good." And we talked about it, and he said, "Well, there's other schools besides OSU, ag schools." And I said, "Well, I think maybe we probably ought to look at that." It's just kind of a passive statement. And then the next day, he called me at I had a summer job, and he called me on the job and said, "Well, we'll be going out to Panhandle in a couple of days and meeting the people at Panhandle State." And I said, "Now, where's that at?" And I didn't know anything about Panhandle State, so he was smart enough to realize that I had the potential. I was an average student, but I always had the drive in anything. Kind of our family was that way, that we had the drive to accomplish things that are good. And so we went out and met the Dean of Agriculture and the President, and it was just a great fit. It was a good fabric type fit, and it was great timing in my life to put me in a position that I realized those 2 years meeting men and ranchers that owned section after section of land, and working on some of those ranches and in those feedlots, and the opportunity that I didn't have in Tulsa County, as far as looking out at a feedlot with 40,000 head of cattle, and working in a sale barn that would run 6, 7, 8, 10,000 head through on Fridays, and being a part of that, it really expanded my thought process in agriculture.
Well, and I'm curious about that too, because you have sort of a sense of certainty as you tell this part of it, that the agriculture was sort of the given part of all of this. And I'm curious if that was something that you really just knew I'm going to go into, or if that was something you made a conscious decision for the direction of your career.
Well, my parents had show horse, rodeo. My mom was the first rodeo queen in Oklahoma.
Wow.
She was a professional bull rider, and so we had that background of the love of agriculture, horses, raising cattle, farming, putting up hay, combining wheat. And so in agriculture was always our kind of love. Our family was centered around agriculture. And so I just, with being the oldest, I had the opportunity to be a part of that. We all had to contribute as a family. And to be able to learn how to drive a tractor and a grain truck, way before 16. I tell our children today that I don't even know when I started driving. I think I was 12 or 13 driving a grain truck, and I said I was even barefooted at times driving the grain truck. You couldn't do that today, but we loved each other. We loved to work. Everything was centered around family. Agriculture, horses, showing horses, and that just kind of, I just kept that interest. It was a love that I had, and still today. I'm this morning I was out running cattle, checking cattle on a 4-wheeler, running around the ranch, counting calves. We're right in the middle of weaning and haying right now, and I guess once it's in your blood, it'll always be there.
I think that's interesting too, because you had both sides of the role model. So your parents had backgrounds, it sounds like, in agriculture, and sort of kept that regardless of what they did as maybe a day job. So it seems like you could have gone both ways. You saw parents that had really successful careers doing other things, but also had this what seems like almost sort of a mandatory side with cattle and horses and things like that. So I'm curious, were you involved in like 4-H or FFA or anything like that?
I was in Tulsa County 4-H 11 years. My mom was a 4-H leader, adult leader, and so all 4 of us kids were involved in 4-H, and we our lives in this real small rural community in far east Tulsa County was church, school, 4-H, some sports that we got to play. Went to a real small school, little country school, and so.
What was the name of the community?
Lynn Lane.
Lynn Lane.
Lynn Lane, and there in the community was a school, a grocery store, and a church, and it lies between Broken Arrow and Catoosa. If you draw a line, Lynn Lane's kind of right in the middle, and we were the last home in Tulsa County to have running water. The water line, city water, stopped at our house, and everybody else around us, there was a couple of men that haul water. So we were very fortunate to have running water at our home, and so that the love of living in a rural setting, and then just pursuing agriculture, I don't know much different.
It's obvious that was where you needed to be. It's just interesting how people make choices.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious too. So Panhandle, it sounds like you really knew that was going to be a good fit for you. Like you sensed that was a good fit for where you needed to be in your life.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, did you have an idea of sort of what you were going to major in? Did you know what part of agriculture? How did you sort of make those decisions?
Well, I think working also at my grandparents' grocery store and meat market in Tulsa. My mom worked there when I was young, and so I went with her after school and got the butcher shop. Always fascinated me, that part of the grocery store. I got to carry a lot of groceries and sweep a lot of floors there in the grocery store, but working the produce, working the meat section was just fascinating to me. And so that kind of always intrigued me, the meat side of it. And so starting out with general ag classes at Northeastern A&M, we did have a meats lab there, a small meats lab, and got to take a meats course. And then at Panhandle State, we slaughtered and processed almost all of the food, all of the meat for the cafeteria out there, plus the dairy processing. And so I worked I actually run the feed mill for 2 years, managed the swine operation, took meat science courses, was on the meats team, the livestock team, and got to go to meat plants, and that just kind of intrigued me. So I kind of drifted into the food science, meat science option of animal science. And so I knew that was the direction when I ended up graduating with my BS degree, a Bachelor of Science degree from Panhandle State. Mm-hmm. When I was looking at graduate school, I knew that I really wanted to be in the meat science industry, meat science part of the industry. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's interesting too that you mentioned you were getting recruited by all sorts of different agricultural schools. I mean, mm-hmm. So I'm curious, why did you end up at OSU? I mean, that's a lot of good competition.
Well, I really liked each of the schools that sent me letters and offered a graduate assistance program. I had friends at New Mexico State, at Las Cruces, and I'd met some professors at Iowa State and K-State and OSU. And I think when I started kind of putting the plan of graduate school together, I said, wait a minute, my family, my parents are in Tulsa, an hour away, and that had a big factor. And so I chose OSU. It was probably not my top choice. I mean, I was really excited about Iowa State, and I was excited about New Mexico State. New Mexico State just seemed a real fit for me. I had some friends down there that were on the staff, and my first judging team coach, Neil Burcham, was there as the livestock judging team coach at New Mexico State. But when I really started looking and analyzing, I should be close to home, and that was a big factor. And I'm glad I chose Oklahoma State. It was just fantastic, the experience at Stillwater, the meat science department, the animal science department. I had great professors in chemistry and biochem and statistics that really I've used that that education throughout my career. Even today, I still look back on things that I learned and use those experiences in the job that I currently have.
Well, I'm curious a little bit about your time at OSU in Stillwater. About sort of what your experience in the classroom is, but also just the transition to living someplace like Stillwater. So, I mean, not that that's too much different than where you were before, but I mean, obviously, it is a community that is the college, right?
Sure.
Like you have the opportunity to interact with primarily students or a different relationship with your faculty. It seems like. I don't know. What did you think whenever you actually moved there? Did you?
I was excited.
Was it an easy transition?
It was a very easy transition. You know, when you move from Goodwell, Oklahoma, in a very, very small ag school, and you come to Stillwater, it's everything's new and a lot of nice living, quality of life opportunities, shopping, restaurants, housing, really a friendly campus like Panhandle State. So it was a very easy transition.
Mm-hmm.
I think back on the animal science professors, the three meat science professors, we were family. You know, we were doing research together and teaching students, undergraduate students, and getting to work in an area that you really enjoyed, that you knew you wanted to make a career out of. It was just really very good, a very good experience. I enjoyed it so much.
So did you, it sounds like you had a graduate assistantship, right?
Yes, I did.
What was your job while you were a graduate assistant?
Well, I worked on research with Dr. Gunther, J.J. Gunther,
Mm-hmm.
and then also I taught the animal science class 3333, which was slaughtering and processing. Dr. Roy Escobar and I taught the laboratory section of the animal science 3333, meat processing, meat slaughter processing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just fit right the direction I wanted to go in my career pathway, and so that was a very good experience.
Mm-hmm.
I only taught one class, and once you went to work for Dr. Gunther, I mean, if you produced, which he only selected people that would produce and assist him, he kept you the whole time you were there. And so Dr. Escobar and I, we didn't get a chance to work for anybody else in the departments, but it was good. It was good. I didn't regret not being able to kind of widen in my studies there as far as a graduate assistant, teaching undergraduates. It was good.
Good. Well, so I wonder too, because you once again, after your time was over at OSU, you were recruited pretty quickly, and I want to get to that a little bit more in depth too. But I'm curious about. Was that a surprise to you while you were at OSU? Were you surprised that there were opportunities coming at you, or?
Oh yes. I mean, here I'm winding up my research, working on my thesis. I completed. I was in the last semester of completing my coursework, and this new state higher education job came available, and so the three meat science professors said, "Hey, Tommy, I think this would be a good fit for you. You have a lot of skill set, knowledge-wise, that you could go down and have this facility under a grant of inspection with USDA, buy the equipment, run it, management, and this would be a good fit for you." And so they kind of directed me there, and it was just a natural. When I interviewed, I mean, they said, "When can you come?" And actually I took the job and moved to Wilburton and ended up finishing my thesis part. Right after my last semester in Stillwater, I came back and completed. I was working on it in Wilburton while I was on the staff there at Eastern, and it took a couple of months to finish my thesis.
Oh wow!
So I was in the final stages
Mm-hmm.
of it, and then sat down with my committee, my graduate committee, and defended the thesis, and all the coursework was done. So,
what was your thesis on?
Dr. Gunther was engaged in beef cattle growth, and so we did a research project with beef cattle, looking at pure English bred cattle versus exotic cattle, same age cattle. We were measuring the growth characteristics of bone, muscle, and fat. Mm-hmm. And also there were other research trials on this same group of cattle that was occurring inside the meat science department, in animal science, nutrition, and beef cattle. There was a lot of research on this set of two different sets of cattle. And so I was able to measure growth characteristics in the laboratory. After we were measuring growth, nutritional feeding trials, and so we had subcategories in the English bred cattle and the exotic Charolais cross cattle. And my part of the study was to measure, first of all, the bone growth. And I would take, after the cattle were slaughtered, we took the carcass data, then I would take the long bones and measure the growth of the long bones. And we stained the bones and measured the growth plates in the long bones and recorded that data to correlate back to all the other information with nutrition, breed, tissue growth, grading of the cattle, and the muscle characteristics. And so it was a multi-team approach, but it was beef cattle growth characteristics is what my part was.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's pretty intensive research.
It was, yeah. There were a lot of professors. And what we were doing was utilizing this set of cattle in the animal science breeding department, nutrition, meat science, with various departments. Dr. Escobar was working on looking at the chemical composition of the muscle and the fat. I was looking at bone growth related to the marbling, the muscle growth characteristics, and fat. Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of different graduate students and professors that were harvesting the data off this set of cattle in this trial.
Yeah. Was it at some point were you tempted to go into the research field? I mean, after your time in this, is that something you thought about?
I really wanted to be more involved in not just purely research. That was not the direction of just sitting in a laboratory and working and doing research. I wanted to be part of research and practical applied sciences, and so I'm a hands-on kind of person. I want to be involved, and being just a laboratory researcher doesn't fit my characteristics at all. And so and that's kind of what intrigued me about being able to build this meat science center at Eastern and train students and also do some research there, ongoing research at Eastern. Mm-hmm. And
I'm curious about something too. So part of the reason why you ended up leaving Eastern was because of the salary compared to other opportunities. I'm curious if, when that job originally came up, if that was something that any of your advisors who encouraged you to apply for the job, is that anything that any of them had flagged, like, oh, maybe this might be not the living wage you're looking for, or?
I think I was so young and naive coming out of graduate school, being married, starting a family, starting a new career. I was more excited about a career, family, the right opportunity, that I really didn't put much thought into salary and benefits and quality of life. And when I started training and the students were graduating, and all of these major meat companies were coming on campus and interviewing, and the students would come and say, what do you think about these opportunities and these salaries and these benefits? I'd say, I'm the lowest paid guy in the facility, and I'm the director. and so after several years, and when you develop those relationships, they were making me job offers also.
Your students are the ones coming on campus.
The companies on campus,
Okay.
they were hiring the graduates, the students, and then they would say, hey, we've got an opportunity here or there. Would you be interested? And I did interview several times, and after completing 5 years there at Eastern, and then with the call of Jerry Owens, it was just the right timing. And I've always had a strong faith that when you put things in the right perspective and priority, that the Lord takes care of you, and He did. He directed our family and myself to Richardson, and it was a true blessing. Fantastic company, fantastic family. Great 10 years managing Owens Country Sausage, one of the best meat companies in the whole United States. They just put employees and families and customers kind of in a Owens family lifestyle, and it was a real enjoyment to be able to manage the operation for the Owens family.
Mm-hmm. So what was the shift that you made in sort of your day-to-day work from doing something like being the director of the meat facility at Eastern to going into an industry position like what you took over?
The shift was very easy because I managed the Eastern Meat Science facility from building it and buying the equipment and maintaining it, hiring staff, recruiting, budgeting, processing the meat, selling the meat to the cafeteria, college cafeteria, faculty, staff, students. And then that transition was really easy, but it was much greater. I mean, I went from a staff of 3 people that I managed to hundreds. I had several hundred plant workers and a management team. I had a budget buying the hogs, slaughter sows, the trucking, the equipment, packaging. All of that budget was literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that I was responsible for. Plus the payroll of hundreds of workers. Tremendous operation, and all we made was breakfast sausage and slaughtering sows. But my first duty every morning was to go through the plant and visit with all my supervisors. I had about 12 supervisors, and made sure everything was lining up to start the processing each morning. And then I purchased all the livestock in the corn belt and lined the trucks up and did the wire transfers of the money, and so it was much greater responsibility.
Yeah.
But it was not a hard transition because it was literally the same kind of hands-on management was required in running the meat company as running the meats lab. I think that the thing that helped me most was I realized that education and training at Owens was needed, and so I implemented training programs like you would in an educational institution. And so I brought an element of employee wellness and training that was lacking at Owens Sausage.
Mm-hmm. Well, but I also feel like a large element of both of those things were that management element. So you had to understand the science behind it, but you also had to be able to have a management ability. Is that something that you had either experienced with or some sort of built-in education with your experience leading up to Eastern and Owens Country Sausage?
Well, I think, my management and financial training started at home with my family. Uh, as a youngster in junior high and high school, uh, we were taught to work and make money and contribute and save, and so I funded 100% of my college education myself. I didn't borrow any money. My parents didn't have to fund my education. They knew that I needed to be in a financial position to take care of myself. They would have done that if I'd asked them, but I was at a point of purchasing my first vehicle with my first check and paid cash for it when I turned 16. So that type of home training just directed me, and I guess I was somewhat independent. I didn't have to call back home to mom and dad and ask for money. I paid for my clothes, my dorm living, my books, my classes, and that just kind of grew through three different education settings at universities, and that's kind of the way I've lived my life. I've really been fortunate, and not only myself, but my twin brothers and sister was taught that same independence.
I was going to ask about, you have a twin. Is that?
No, I have two brothers that are twins.
Oh, you have two brothers that are twins.
Yeah,
okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah, I have a sister that's 4 years younger, and 8 years younger, a set of twin brothers, and we're all kind of independent. We were raised that way. It was just the way my dad was raised, and you just pay your way, and
Well, it sounds like you had the opportunity to create an income of some sort too, through maybe the growing up on the cattle area.
Sure.
But I'm curious, is that primarily how you put yourself through school?
Well, I can't remember not having a job as a kid. Okay. Literally working hauling hay or working in my grandparents' grocery store and meat market. I worked at a local grocery store for a period of time in our community that was much closer than my grandparents' store in Tulsa. So I always had an opportunity to make money, and my parents taught me how to save money. They took me down. I had a bank savings account and a checking account, and I never will forget writing my first check to pay for my first semester of college at Northeastern A&M. My mom pulled my checkbook out and said, "Okay, now this is how you do this," and I wrote my first check at the end of the line and paid for my first semester, and then it was just routine after that.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
Well, I think that was the way my parents were raised, and so we were raised as 4 kids that way, and that's the way I've lived all my life. I tell our kids today, our four grown kids, I can only remember going to a bank and borrowing money 2 or 3 times, and that was to buy a house. I just haven't borrowed money. I was raised in a time where if you've got the money and can afford it and you need it, well, buy it. If you don't have the money, well, then you probably don't need it. So that's just the way we were taught.
Well, what about the people management angle? Because it sounds like that was a really strong skill of yours for both of those first 2 jobs, was being able to manage people. And I'm curious, I don't necessarily think of that as something that you are taught as a part of the trade in ag school, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's a combination. It starts. I've told people many times that your training really is done at home, and our time and with our family, prime time was breakfast and dinner in the evenings, and that's when we enjoyed each other's time. We had finished choring. My sister and mom had dinner and breakfast prepared. It set the tone of the day at the breakfast table. It kind of closed the evening out, getting ready for bed after dinner. And we discussed issues and opportunities and fun times, and sometimes not so much fun times, of things that were before us in life. And that was just prime time at our house. And we didn't live of a real extravagant life, but I can't ever remember doing without. I always had clean clothes and was able to go to the picture show at times, or roller skate, or a movie, participate in school activities. We took a vacation every now and then. Every few years we'd take a small car vacation. We never flew on an airplane. I think I was probably in college, or maybe even out of college, before I ever took a flight in an airplane. But we had a good lifestyle because we created that with the vegetables out of the garden, pecan grove, our fruit trees, the canning, raising cattle, having some chickens and fresh eggs and things like that. I don't guess we knew any different. Nobody told us any different that there was people flying across the country in airplanes and going to resorts and playing golf and things like that. That was just not in our world and our family's family time. My parents never played a round of golf in their life, and it was all centered around making something better, a contribution to society. My father started the rural fire department in Lynn Lane with a group of guys. My mom was really involved in 4-H and helping with homemaking and training young boys and girls. And we had a fantastic church life in our community with our church there, and it was kind of well-rounded.
So do you feel like because you had that sort of well-rounded, larger picture maybe within your childhood and your developing years, that maybe you had a better sense of good business? Is that sort of how that translates?
Yeah, there's no question about that. My parents would say, they would say this from time to time, this is not good. They'd say, Tommy, this is not good. We don't need to go in this direction, whatever the issue was. This is good. We need to really look at this, pursue this, whatever, like 4-H. I had the opportunity to go to Roundup at Stillwater and do a record book each year, and I got to go to Kansas City, the American Roll, a couple of times, Chicago, on a train. We took a train trip a couple of times in 4-H to Kansas City, one to Chicago. And they'd say, this is good. You need to do this. You need to pursue this. This will help you. And that was kind of the lifestyle that we lived in. We lived in a time where the keys were left in the tractors and the pickups in the car, and we didn't lock our doors at night. And when the neighbors needed help, we helped one another, vice versa. And we lived kind of in a kind of a wonderland kind of time setting. I think the biggest thing that I can remember happening in our community, there was a poultry farm that sold eggs, a big farm. I worked at it as a kid gathering eggs back in, I think I was probably a 5th or 6th grader. I'd go over, a couple of us guys would go over and help gather a lot of eggs. It was a commercial egg farm. And one time it was an honor system with purchasing eggs on this cooler on the back enclosed back porch of this home on the egg farm. Somebody stole the coffee can with the egg money in it, and it was probably $10 or $15, $20 back then. But that was, I think they may have called the sheriff. I don't know, but that was a big event. So that kind of tells you the sheltered kind of life that we lived. We didn't have time to get in trouble.
Well, it sounds like you were too busy with all of your jobs anyway.
Yeah, we didn't get to lay around on the couch in the summertime at our house.
Not a lot of video games. Well, so, okay, back at Owen Country Sausage, so you were there for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So what did you do after you left there, and what prompted you to make a move?
Well, I met Thomas Glenn Potter at the second generation of Potter Sausage in Durant, Oklahoma. He was on my advisory board at Eastern Oklahoma State. I had an agriculture industrial board there for the Meat Science Center, and Thomas Glenn Potter was a board member, and so I knew Mr. Potter back at Eastern, and then we were involved in various meat organizations, industrial organizations with other meat companies in the Southwest. And so I had a long relationship with Mr. Potter, and one evening, it was a Wednesday night, I was leaving the house to attend church, and he called me and he said, "Tommy, you know how to cook sausage and make cooked meat ready to eat items, and we know nothing about that. And I'd like for you to come help me build a new plant addition to cook sausage. You've done that at Owens, and you got them started in that, and would you consider that?" And I said, "Well, after church, I'll call you." And we visited after church, and he offered me a job as vice president of Potter Sausage. So I moved back to Oklahoma and built the plant. We got the new products developed, packaged, and in the market, and that was another 10-year stint in my career, being the operational vice president of operations for J.C. Potter Sausage. So I spent really, after graduate school, 25 years managing 3 facilities, the Eastern facility and the Owens operational side of the facility, and then the Potter facility. And it all correlates back to educational training, mainly at Panhandle State and really at Oklahoma State, from a meat science background, from a chemistry standpoint, a biochemical functionality standpoint that applies to industry and research and quality assurance.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about this too, because when I first sort of tried to figure out where I was going to come today, I wasn't, even though I had read your bio and I know you had this background, I wasn't thinking about the fact that you had a 25-year, like, this huge career. It's a long career. In the meat facility management, because that's not what you do today.
No, not at all.
So I'm curious how you got from I guess J.C. Potter was the last one you worked at. How did you get from there to what you're doing now?
Well, it's again one of those faith and trust that you look at in life. That there's unknowns in life, and you just think, is this something that I should pursue? And what happened? Mr. Potter, Thomas Glenn, being second generation, he and his 2 sisters, after the parents passed, owned the company with their children. But Thomas Glenn was the CEO and president of the company. The sisters owned stock, and they actually, the sisters and their husbands went and run and owned a meat company in Longmont, Colorado. Run the pork sausage company for a number of years and sold it. But Thomas Glenn was still the head of Potter Sausage on the day-to-day operation. Well, he passed away. And at that point, the family came together and decided to sell the company. They sold the company to an investment group in Chicago, and the investment group analyzed the structure of the company, the cost of the company, and they terminated the employment of all top management. Basically, they couldn't afford us with being so highly financially leveraged. And at that point, it was the first time in my career that I was unemployed. I had, can you believe this? I had never filled out a resume. I didn't even have a resume. I just went from graduate school to Eastern without a resume, was recruited to Owens without a resume, and to Potters without a resume. I'd never filled out or developed a resume in my life. And so when all top management and sales and marketing and accounting and operations, I was the vice president of the company, I was terminated, and so I was pursuing employment in the meat industry, and just almost took a job at a major meat company in Iowa, a brand new plant, and and was actually in Iowa when I got a phone call. My wife was applying in this town in Iowa, this small community in Iowa. She had taught second grade here about 25 years in Durant, was applying at this elementary school in Iowa. I'd already accepted to be the plant operations manager of this very large facility. And the phone rang, and it just didn't fit. It just didn't feel right on her side. A strange school, new people, a different community, a different climate, a different part of the United States. And I really didn't know people made that much money. The job offer that I actually took the job and said, yeah, and was looking at houses. And when Barbara, my wife, came out of the interview of the school, and we got to talking, and we went to the Chamber of Commerce in this town in Iowa and visited with these ladies, and they made a few comments about, the snow is very deep here in the winter and you won't see the ground for 7 months. And then we were working with a realtor, and the cost of homes and the cost of living, that big salary wasn't near that big. And the phone rang in our car, our cell phone rang, and it was the city manager and the CEO presidents of 3 Durant banks on a conference call, and said, Tommy, we've created a new position in Durant. We're going to start with an economic developer. We want to grow our community. And I said, well, my wife and I are sitting in this convenience store parking lot. I just purchased 2 Diet Cokes, and we had prayer.
While you were in Iowa, yeah.
Excuse me.
No,
We had prayer because we were at a point in our life that we needed some direction. Mm-hmm. The phone rang. It said, come home and be our economic developer.
Did you tell them whenever they called you that?
No, I don't think I did.
It would be hard not to say.
I said, I'm sure I said, well, I remember saying, well, what is that? Here I got so emotional, I apologize.
Do you need a break? But
no, I'm good.
I think it really demonstrates, though, the paths we take in life, though, and how much it's, I think, when we first talked about why we would do this, and part of why I think it's the way people end up where they're at, it's not just about education, it's about, I think this is a demonstration, it's about intuition.
Yeah.
It's about the larger picture in your family and what you need in your life.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, it is. I walked away from the largest career opportunity that was ever offered to me. I literally have said this many times to people. I didn't know people made that much money. I really didn't. I suspected it, but here I'm a pretty simple kind of guy, hands-on, love people, and I got so caught up in this job interview and flying back and forth and accepting the job and looking at a house, and and looking at houses to buy, and then Barbara needing a job, wanting a few years to fulfill her retirement in education, that it was moving very fast. And then with her experience and interview not being the best, and only graduating from Durant High, graduating from Southeastern, getting a master's at Southeastern, living in Durant her whole life, teaching at that point probably 25, 26 years. And then here we were in this whirlwind, and it just, God put these two little elderly ladies at Chamber of Commerce to tell us, you better look at some other things here. There's weather, there's snow, we're not a big town, da 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 da. And then we said we need to go get a Diet Coke, and we drove. I never will forget this. We drove to this little convenience store, and it was Casey's General Store, and I went in and got two Diet Cokes. Came back out, and Barbara said, "Let's pray about this." And we prayed that, God, this may not be what we should be doing. You need to guide us, because we don't have our priorities lined up with you at this point. We don't feel comfortable. We need a direction. Then the phone rings. We had a couple of sips of Diet Coke, and the phone rings, and it was so positive. These four gentlemen, the mayor may have been there also, 4 or 5 gentlemen from Durant that I knew, was calling and saying, Tommy, all you got to do is come home, fill an application out, give us a resume. And I'm thinking, ooh, I don't have one of those. We're in the interview process, and we have not had a successful interview process. We think, knowing what you did at Potter's, which was growing the company to the highest level that it had ever been grown to from a volume and profitability standpoint, that you would be the right person. You're homegrown. You're here. We know you. Your family. And I said, okay. And we headed back from Iowa to Durant, Oklahoma, and Barbara signed another year's contract to teach, and I filled out the paperwork, and today is my 19th year start as the executive director of the Durant Industrial Authority, and it's been a total career change from the food industry, the meat science part, but still I'm involved in agriculture and business and creating jobs and improving the quality of life for the citizens in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. So what was one of the biggest shifts you had to make then? Because it is a complete career change, but that I kind of feel it goes back to sort of your management and your business skills, which is what made you successful with some of your, probably made you successful as a VP Potter. But I'm just sort of curious, what was the biggest challenge for you making that shift?
Well, the biggest challenge was not the job duties. It was trying to learn a whole new environment, working with federal, state, and local government agencies. Working with a meat inspector every day for 25 years is one thing. But when you're working with senators, representatives, federal, state, and local government entities and regulations, that was all new to me. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn the government aspect of it, and governments function at a much slower rate than industry. In the meat business, you had to make decisions immediately. In government, that decision may take 4 or 5 days, or it may take a year to accomplish, to complete the goal of the direction you're heading. So I had to learn that aspect of it. But the people side, I just love to be around good, positive people. And so I was able to build a team and a network, and it's taken, the start of 19 years to do that. And we are if not the top, we're right there at the top of the fastest growing rural communities in the state of Oklahoma. We've this year will be the largest economic development, investment, and job creation year in the history of Bryan County and Durant, Oklahoma. We've got hundreds of millions of construction going on today, and today's a tremendous day. We just signed over a 400-acre site this morning prior to this interview on the largest project being the commercial metal steel mill, 400-acre site. But it's starting out at about a $300 million investment in land, building equipment, and infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It's phenomenal. It's one of the largest projects to come to Oklahoma, new projects. Mm-hmm. And it's exciting. It's exciting. The thing that excites me every day is the passion to help people.
Yeah. Well, and this also makes me think about what draw those 4 or 5 people that called you. The ones that were sitting around, obviously, in a room thinking, we're not getting what we need from applicants. Who can do this job? Who do we trust? So how did they know you? I mean, how did they come to that conclusion, do you think?
Well, in rural Oklahoma, Durant's no different. You're involved in community civic organizations. You're involved in banking. You personally bank at a bank or two. You have the business side of Potter Sausage, that banking, employment. Everybody kind of knows everybody. Most people are related some way or another. And so, you establish you establish yourself, and people know, your motor rendi and how you function. And when you manage one of the largest, Potter's was the largest manufacturer when I came to Durant. We had several. We had about 250 employees and grew that. So, your word is your bond, and when you're out on the street working and doing things in the civic organizations and business, and then in education and kids events and sporting events and church, you put all that together, well, people know you pretty well. You can't fool very many people today, and so they knew that I had a stability at Potter Sausage, and they saw that being a positive trait, and knew that I had the stick to attitude to accomplish the task. You have to do that in agriculture. You have to do that in the meat business. Mm-hmm. And so I just took that and moved it over into the side of economic development and growing our community. Believe it or not, right next door was the broom closet of the chamber, and that's where I started. I had a desk and a phone and a pencil and a tablet my first day on the job in the broom closet of the chamber.
Is that not where your assistant sits?
That my administrative assistant's in the broom closet, and here I have a big office and conference room.
Well, it doesn't look like a broom closet.
But no. We've done so much for families and friends and job creation and quality of life. It's just been phenomenal. Mm-hmm. In 2002, we were selected, the Team Durant Economic Development Department that I manage. We were selected as one of the top 10 best economic development organizations in the United States. Just last month, we were selected again in 2016, this year, as again one of the best top 10 economic development organizations in the United States. That's a big award, and to have accomplished bringing in these major national companies that have created literally several thousand jobs is really an honor. And but I still every morning think about when I come to work, when I get up, I think about those people working and having an opportunity to have a better lifestyle. It's not the trophies, it's not the plaques, it's not the magazine articles. It's that mom and dad getting health insurance or optical or dental for the first time in their life, or a bonus check, a stable job, a better quality of life. That's the passion.
One of the things I want to point out, because I think that is important anywhere that you are, any community that you're in, if you're in a position like yourself, I think that's a really important attitude to have. But southeastern Oklahoma is one of the more impoverished areas in the entire country. I mean, it was one of the, 8 designated Promise Zone initiatives from Obama's administration, right, that was designated sort of to try and fight that poverty. So it seems to me that is exceptionally important in an area like southeastern Oklahoma. There's kind of so much going through my head about the implications of all of that, but how are you able to make those accomplishments? Because I think the fact that you've had significant. Let me back up a second. So, for example, the deal that you just closed on today, which is a huge. You're right, it's huge. That comes on the heels of not just 18 months of work on that project, but almost 2 decades of relationship building and community building, capacity building. What are some of the things in that almost 20-year career that you look back on and you think were some of those staples? Like, what are some of those things that you think were really the building blocks to get Durant to where it is today?
You have to know the assets of your community. That's one of the key factors. You have to know what your community assets are, and I call them building blocks. To build a project, you have to be able to plug in the right pieces of the building blocks or puzzle pieces to make the project successful. It has to, first of all, be good for the company. If the company's not successful, if the company's not profitable being here, then we need to stop right up front the first meeting. It's got to be able to sustain a profitability mode and a growth mode in this community. Can we support this company with workforce, infrastructure, all the skill sets needed employment-wise and training to make that happen? The worst thing you could do would be to recruit a major corporation here. They invest millions or hundreds of millions, and then something fail. Well, I'm sorry, we now can't build that 1,000,000-gallon water tower. You can't have enough water. Or no, we can't put that rail spur in. You can't have rail accessibility. That would be a disaster. So you have to be able to analyze your assets and make sure that the community lines up with the company and the project. That requires a team approach. I've created a group here in our community that assists me with economic development. There's 2 groups plus the mayor and the city council. We call it Team Durant. That team is different on every project. Some projects require large amounts of electricity or large amounts of water or rail or highway access. I bring those people to the table that can plug in and say, yes, we can provide that electricity, that amount, or yes, we can handle these many rail cars to your siding, things like that. You have to be a good listener. You have to understand, and I think this is where my 25-year training in running 3 meat operations, I'm sitting on the other side of the table with the client when they're asking the questions about jobs and infrastructure and taxation and land and site cost and things like that. I've been on that side of the table. I know what it takes to run a major meat company. I'm sitting on this side answering the questions, but I know what it takes. And if we don't have that asset or we can't meet that requirement, I'll tell them on the first visit right up front, this won't work for us. This is not good for you. We can't do this. Or we can meet all your needs. Don't worry. We've never had a failure. We've never lost money. We've never had a plant close up and disappear. We've had a plant shut down that we've reloaded, but we've never just brought a company in, got it operational, and then they move out of town. That's not happened in these 18 years. So honesty, openness, meeting the needs with the right building blocks, bring the federal, the state support, utility support in to handle this Team Durant approach. When they leave after the first visit, when that company leaves after the first visit, I've answered 100% of their questions. Yeah, there's an additional questions that come up, but there's no hidden agenda. They know from our side that it's either going to be a thing that we should pursue or not, whether it's good or bad. And we turn down projects all the time that are not a fit for our community. We don't have that skill set, or like we had one time we had a group that wanted to build an automotive plant in our area and needed 2,000 acres. I told them right up front on the phone, I couldn't put 2,000 acres together at one parcel to meet your needs. We're not big enough. We don't have enough employees. It would take several thousand to run an automotive manufacturing plant. That's not our forte in Durant. So we know our limits and we present those. We don't misrepresent our community. And that's really been one of our key strong suits of being open and laying everything right out on the table the first visit.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm towards the end of the hour and a half I told you we would take, even though I'm pretty sure we could talk about a lot of other things, but I don't want to keep you too long. One question, this is just sort of the back to the OSU focus. So I noticed that you have an OSU tie over there on your chair. Are you still an OSU fan? Are you still?
Oh yeah, big time.
How do you connect with? Yes, you do. Over there, look at your whole corner.
Yeah, that's my Oklahoma State corner. Yes. Yeah.
So why? Like, you were there for 2 years. It's not that those weren't formative years, but why is that still something that you?
I think that I will always hang my hat on OSU. The opportunity that they provided in my whole career was so needed at that time. I needed that training. I needed that education. I needed the development, being able to teach students and develop with students and learn the research side of it, the teaching side of it, plus the classroom side. It was well-rounded. And OSU will always be a part of my life. I'm grateful.
Yeah. I think you've illustrated that point really well with just sort of where you've been and how that comes back. But yeah, I was just curious because different people carry that with them differently, right?
They carry it different, and I tell people every day I have the opportunity to talk to someone, and they'll say, "How you doing?" And I'll tell them my standard answer is, I'm blessed, and I've never had it this good. I mean, I've never had it this good. You know, I've accomplished things that I knew nothing about directional wise in a career. I didn't have a career path that I was driven to. And I'm telling you, the people that I've met, the people that I've been able to help, the blessings that I've received with a beautiful wife and kids and 7 grandkids, I look back on how I was raised. I like for nothing. I enjoy life. I've never had it this good. I'm telling you, I've never had it this good. Today's the best day of my life. And tomorrow's going to be better.
I'm laughing because I thought today was the best day of your life, because when I walked in, it was 5 seconds after you'd closed on that deal, and I thought, that's it. But apparently that's just you every day. Yeah.
You know, this is a once in a lifetime experience for an Oklahoma rural economic developer. There's only been a few of these that have occurred in rural Oklahoma to close on a real estate transaction of almost $300 million, and to sign those papers this morning and transfer 400 acres to this company that is the 3rd largest steel manufacturer in the United States. They're an international company in 6 continents, billions in sales. Our first international company, starting my 19th today, the first day of my 19th year in economic development. I'm telling you, it's all good, really. And I think, you know, that sometimes we get caught up in life and get hung up on the little issues. The little issues will take care of themselves. You just focus on the big issues and work on them. You solve them, the little things will take care of themselves. Jerry Owens taught me one thing that I'll never forget, and he taught us time management. We had a staff meeting every week. It lasted 60 minutes. It started at 8, it quit at 9. We got everything accomplished each week in 1 hour, and he would say, whatever you need, you can have. Just work with me, justify it. Let's work on the $20 and $30 an hour jobs. Let's don't worry about the $5. Let's focus on the big stuff. The little stuff will take care of itself. And I've never forgot that. So I focus on the big things each day, whatever that is. And I've got a whole list of 14 today to work on. I've only accomplished 4 so far. But I've got some big tasks to work on today. And I'm the other little things on this, they'll take care of themselves. We'll work on them tomorrow or some other time. And but it's all good.
That's fantastic. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about before we end? Anything you think we missed? Or that I didn't know to ask about?
No, I think you've covered a wide array of things. I'm sorry that I got emotional.
Please don't apologize. I do feel it is important to be passionate about things.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that we didn't talk about, and I've served many years at the governor's pleasure on the Oklahoma State University Food and Ag Products Center. And that is a tremendous program, facility, and what they're doing in food science and food safety today is really going to open doors for food safety for years to come in America.
What do you think some of the highlights of that are? Like, what are the things that you see that are maybe going to trigger that sort of broadening?
Well, you know, we've had in America over the last 5 to 10 years some major outbreaks of food poisoning, whether it's raw vegetables or, you know, the cantaloupes or meat recalls, poultry recalls, the ice cream event that just happened in the Southwest with listeria, and those are associated with loss of lives. And I think that the Ag and Food Products Center is right there to assist industry to prevent those kind of recalls and disasters and loss of lives. Mm-hmm. And so OSU is right on the cutting edge of having this new food science, food safety option as a discipline in the Department of Agriculture and Animal Science. That's just really a neat step that's just occurred this year. But the way they assist industry, not only in Oklahoma but outside of Oklahoma, it's necessary. Mm-hmm. You know, when a company, there are some companies that have had recalls that didn't survive. It put them out of business. And so the preventive side, the educational side, is so important, and Dr. Escobar, Roy Escobar, and the staff there addresses that and will assist. And Oklahoma and our state financially supporting that at Oklahoma State's really big. Mm-hmm. I'm proud to be a part of that.
That's fantastic. It's even after having not been directly in the industry for almost 20 years, you're still staying involved through, it sounds like, through this board, right?
Oh, yes. You know, one of the things that's just happened this year in Durant, the company that I managed, I've had the opportunity to help sell it twice, and just sold it a year ago. And the former J.C. Potter Sausage Company is now Bruce Pack, headquartered in Oregon. And they have 2 plants in Oregon and now the new plant in Durant. They just opened 3 months ago, invested millions, over $20 million. They have 135 workers today, growing to 300. And I was a part of, helped recruit that, incentivize it, and bring the state agencies in to accomplish that. So I'm still involved indirectly in the meat industry.
Yeah.
Right here at home.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's neat.
Yeah.
That's also interesting about the OSU. I you know, it's a big campus. I didn't realize that that was on the cusp, but I think that's also really great.
Yeah, it is literally the leading food safety research and product development center on any college campus in the whole United States. It's number one, and so I'm grateful to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very neat. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to release you.
Okay. Good.
And
Good.
thank you. Thank you very much. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Great.